Hello friend, my name is Doombabe and today we are going to be talking about Backstage Pass. And we're going to be doing something that we have never done before, and that is review a game that is still in early access. So, funny story before we get into this, I actually really wanted to review this for the longest time, but I never did because A, it never went on sale and it's $30, and B, it's in early access, which always throws a huge red flag up for me. But then I was like, you know what, it hasn't been updated in like a year or something, and the developers basically said that the game is absolutely 100% complete except for adding voice acting, so I eventually bit the bullet and bought it. Then I spent the 3 days it took to get through pretty much the entire game. I wrote up the script, everything was all ready to go, and then the developers were like, hey, we updated it with voice acting. And you know what? There were some bonus scenes or lines or something, so I had to go back and replay it all over again. Anyways, developed by Sakevisual and released on Steam in 2014, Backstage Pass is an otome dating simulator visual novel that tells the story of Sian, who was raised in show business by her mother, who was a professional makeup artist. As a result, she is an extremely talented makeup artist that helps out her childhood friend who is a rising star, but she wants something a little different out of life, so she decides to attend college and get an education in something else. However, when her father suffers a serious work injury, she has to pick up her brushes and palettes to help her family with the medical costs. This is when she meets a whole cast of characters, like the producer of the new hit TV show Lloyd and beautiful model Matthew. This is outstandingly entertaining to play, and a large reason for that is how great the writing is. So a huge chunk of the game's theme is centered around careers. Sian, who doesn't really know whether or not she wants to be a makeup artist or not, gets a job in show business that can either lead on to her being a producer, or maybe she decides that she likes being a makeup artist and she sticks on that path. Or you can step away from show business and you can focus on becoming a very popular blogger, which was a route I accidentally stumbled on. But Doombabe, you said this is a dating simulator. Doesn't that mean that the story is focused on romance? No, it's actually not. You see, the game doesn't force you down any romantic paths, and some of the characters are actually pretty damn difficult to romance. So while yes, this is technically a dating simulator, it isn't like Katawa Shoujo, where you can either romance someone or you can die. You're not punished for pursuing a friendship route with a character, and you're not punished if you decide to focus on Sian and her career. That being said, let's talk about each characters and their paths, because I am terrible at structuring my scripts. There's a very wide cast of characters that each have their own development and they have their own backgrounds, which really makes them feel three-dimensional and relatable, which is something that is absolutely imperative for visual novels. And not all of the characters you can interact with are just on the forefront. There are actually some characters that are very well hidden in the game where you need to do very specific things to unlock their roots. And I'm not going to tell you who, because that'll ruin the experience. As for the characters' roots, each character has their own story that, for the most part, really only shares a few common factors, which is basically just like the base plot. And each route has multiple endings to amount to something ridiculous, like 16, I think. I got to 10 endings and I just had to stop because this game is just freaking huge. That being said, I'm not going to lie and say that all of the endings are entirely satisfying. I mean, I'm not gonna say that it's no thank you, where just everything is awful, but there were a couple endings that just kind of came to an abrupt end, especially with Lloyd's friendship, producer ending, where it just stops. And then there were a few where I was just feeling kind of unhappy with how the story ended. But thankfully this isn't one of those dating simulators that just kind of stops at the first kiss. We actually get to see the relationships develop, and that just instant brownie points right there. If any of you remember when I reviewed Roommates way back then, Backstage Pass kind of plays a lot like that. At the start of every week, you're going to need to organize your schedule. This means you can choose to study, blog, work, sleep, or go out on the town. Your decisions directly impact your stats, such as intelligence and charisma, which you will need to appeal to certain characters if you choose to romance or befriend them. At the same time, you need to make sure that your fatigue isn't getting too high, otherwise you will be forced to skip a block, and you also need to keep an eye on your wealth and your GPA. If you go out, you can choose to either go with a friend or you can go on your own. You unlock different scenes depending on which you choose, and there are actually some locations that you can only unlock by going out and purchasing certain items on your own. However, if you go out too often on your own, you are wasting valuable time with whoever you have your sights set on. I absolutely adore visual novels with resource management, so I was just absolutely tickled at how fun it was to plan out my weeks. I think my biggest praise for the gameplay though has to do with how your decisions don't exactly have transparent outcomes. When you're on the computer checking your email, which is totally interactive and I loved it, you will eventually get job offers and requests to spend time with some people, and while it would seem like it makes sense to accept all of the offers that you receive, especially if they are high-paying jobs, spending the evening working or spending time with someone else may take away time you could be spending with your special someone. So you need to keep that in mind when you're accepting offers. However, at the same time, accepting an offer may get you brownie points with someone else. I just thought that was a really interesting change in pace because a lot of visual novels have very predictable outcomes when it comes to making decisions. I do have a massive complaint though, and that is how you have to wear season-appropriate clothing. Now, I absolutely had a ball with designing outfits for Sian in Backstage Pass. I spent so much time mixing and matching some of the different pieces you can buy at the clothing store until I realized that you can't mix seasonal stuff. I tried to make this really cute outfit with the little tank top tie thing and skinny jeans and boots, and it wouldn't let me because the skinny jeans were only appropriate for winter, and I think I was trying to make her wear them in summer. But that really did kill a lot of the fun, especially when a lot of the classy outfits are very boring and just unflattering and very grandma-ish. Because yes, your clothing style does actually matter because different types of clothing have different stats, so you can wear whatever your special honey likes. Speaking of stats, I did notice the only bug I actually noticed in the game was there were a few times in a couple of routes where my stats would completely drop to 0, even though I was working on them frequently and using consumable items. So that was kind of weird and kind of really annoying. So let's start this off like usual with the sprites, which are the main focus of the game. We have a wide variety of characters that, for once, actually do feel somewhat unique instead of just being a cast of stereotypes. Specifically, Benito really does have a one-of-a-kind feel about him, especially with that spiky green hair of his, and I would definitely be able to recognize John if he were put in a collage of random anime characters. I do feel like Lloyd looks a lot like Reno from Final Fantasy though, so I don't know if that's a bad thing. I'm just wondering if maybe he was just very heavily influenced by Reno's character design. Character designs aside, the art is just absolutely stellar. The lines are smooth and clean, the coloring and shading is just out of this world, and I can only imagine how painstaking it was to add all of the detail that they did because there was no effort spared in making the characters look absolutely beautiful. But I wouldn't be me if I wasn't a nitpicking bitch, so we're going to point out a couple of things that weirded me out. First thing is the characters' noses, because there were a few times where their noses were just some sort of line that wasn't quite positioned right. This was mostly something I noticed with Adam or Benito, but there were a couple times in like the CGs where I would notice it. It wasn't something that would totally take away from the scene, but it was something that once you noticed it, you noticed it. My next beef is with the elbows, which looked oddly pointy and too skinny when they were bent. Again, not a terrible flaw, it's just really hard to unsee something like that. That being said, let's move on to world design, which I absolutely have nothing but praise for. The backgrounds are all beautifully created with elements that make them totally different from the last. Outstanding coloring, just enough detail for them to look pretty and high quality without being distracting, and they blended blended in seamlessly with the character sprites. I also really enjoyed how some of the backgrounds, such as the courtyard for the school, would change a little bit depending on the season. When it came to the menu, let's just boil it down to it's totally adorbs. Whoever did the interface art did a splendid job on perfectly capturing the showbiz theme, with the stars and the ink splotches and the film reel. Seriously, whoever did that was totes on their A game. The game interface was just awesome in general, even if there were a few moments where I felt like the text box was a little too big for what it was holding. As for the technical bits, full screen was compatible with dual monitors, which is a huge plus. However, it is sort of locked in at just kind of like a square box with black bars on the side. Not that I really care because I play everything in windowed mode anyways, but I figured I would mention it. My only real complaint is really even not so much of a complaint, it's just me whining. In the very opening cinematic, we get this cute little animated video, so I thought there were going to be animated portions, and there were not, and that really let me down. So don't be fooled like I was. So all in all, I really enjoyed Backstage Pass. I was really hesitant about buying it at first because, you know, it's an early access and it never went on sale, but I'm really glad I dropped the 30 bucks on it. The art is absolutely stellar, the routes are all very different from each other, and it has a soundtrack that is just phenomenal in every way. Except for the opening cinematic, which had this really horrible, terrible, high-pitched voice singing the vocals, and it was just really piercing and awful, and I just... nope. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Backstage Pass, which I will be linking in the description below. Have you played it? If you have, did you ever manage to get any of the hidden routes without looking up a guide to intentionally get it? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, you can find all of my social media as well as my Patreon in the description. Happy unbirthday, and I will see you later. Bye!